Many times when going through the sales process with sellers, they tell us what they want for their house and we underwrite it, and the numbers are just way off. And I'm going to tell you a story about a deal where exactly that happened. And we just closed on that deal last week and we made $40,000 from it. The lesson is, and I'm talking to me here because I struggle with this very early on in my career, you always make the offer. Who am I? My name is Ryan Rice. I am a full-time real estate investor. Did about 40 deals last year. I share as much as I can with the hopes that you can make more money in your real estate business. So here's the story with that deal. We had someone see our TV commercial. They called in and we went through the sales process. And towards the end of the sales process, I got from him that he wanted $360,000 for his house. And I had some context on where that number was coming from. He said he had previously worked with a realtor, and the realtor suggested somewhere around that sales price. And granted, most sellers, when they call in, don't have a good understanding that, number one, that sales price does not mean that that's what they're going to put in their pocket. And number two, just the difference between a retail and an investor type of offer. And so a lot of times we have to educate them on exactly what that looks like and what the differences are. And that's why it's so important. I talk about this a ton, but your job is not to get them to sell their house to you. It's to give them information they need to make a decision. And a lot of times they just might need to know the pros and the cons of listing with a realtor and the pros and cons of selling off market to you. But we went through the sales process. He told me he wanted $360K for his house. And it was a great house in a really good neighborhood. So this was a property I knew could be a deal if we could work something out. And I underwrote the deal. And when I underwrote it, the most I figured I could pay was about $275,000. And my first thought after I underwrote that deal was like, man, we are just way off here. And what I did a lot early on in my career with sellers is when I was that far off, sometimes I would just call the seller back and I would say, hey, like, I don't really want to offend you and we just can't get anywhere close to what it is that you're looking for. And so, I don't want to offend you by an offer. And then sometimes I would try to entice them to say, oh, well, what's your offer? But if they didn't do that, then I just wouldn't give the offer. And a lot of times too, there's a very specific offer script that I go through. And if it was way off, I felt uncomfortable going through that normal script because the first part of the script is talking about the process of if they decide to move forward. And I just felt uncomfortable going through that entire script and telling them what the process is might look like if they decide that they want to work with us, and then giving them this really, really low offer. It was just really uncomfortable, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't have the skill to be able to talk to the seller in a way that I could still, make the offer. And so a lot of times I would just not make the offer. And I think that costed me a good amount of money, because what I have since learned, and what I want to ensure that you guys understand when you're talking to sellers, when a seller gives you a number of what it is that they want, a lot of times we don't have context on where that number comes from. It could be what they see on Zillow. It could be, like in this case, they talk to a realtor. There could be so many different things. And we don't know. But they're going to give us a number that they're going to give us the highest number that they can think of, right? Because they want to get the most that they can. I've had a lot of sellers tell me, yeah, your offer makes sense. I wanted to try and get as much as I could, right? They're doing what they feel is in their best interest. And a lot of times we don't have context on where that number is coming from. And it's important to not make judgment on whatever number that they give us. And what I found is a lot of times the number that they give us has zero correlation to whether or not we can actually do a deal, because they're just going to throw out whatever number. They honestly don't know. And where you can provide them benefit is by educating them on the pros and cons of both routes. And if there is a problem that you are very well equipped to solve, then maybe it's a deal that you could work out regardless of how much of a discrepancy there is between their asking price and what you can pay. So I ended up going through my entire offer script. I offered him, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I did during that offer that I think helped bridge the gap between my discomfort, because that is, I've started doing a few things while making the offer that help me get through that discomfort. And I'll share those things with you guys so that, you can get through that as well. But I made the offer, and he said, we had a really good conversation. And I think he told me that he wanted to talk to his fiance. He gave me a few objections, and I addressed the objections. We actually had a really good relationship, a really good conversation. And he said he had to get back to me. And as hard as I tried to address that objection, we addressed it. We were kind of playful, and I even said something like, oh, Mr. Seller, you're not going to be one of those that ghosts me, right? And I could hear in his voice that he was someone that if he communicated something to me, he was going to put in effort to stick to that commitment. And so I wanted to stress test that and really gain commitment from him. And he vowed to me that he wasn't going to ghost me. He was going to get back to me. And he did exactly what it was that he said he would do. He got back to me. And by the way, when I offered $270,000. And when he got back to me, he said, hey, I've thought about it. If you can do 275, then I'll move forward. And it just so happened 275 was the highest of where I was comfortable offering. And we made a deal. We closed last week, and the company made $40,000 on that deal. Quick interruption. If you at any point have listened to this podcast and you've gotten some sort of value and you have not left the podcast a rating, it would mean a great deal to me if you could leave it a rating. That's one way that this podcast gets pushed out to more people. So that would mean a lot to me. I would appreciate you. And let's get back to the show. Thanks. And it's such a good lesson. And I think there's 4 parts of this lesson that I want to make sure to convey to you guys and also convey to me, because I still get uncomfortable when there's a big discrepancy. And I'm talking to myself just as much here, because it's so important for my business that I'm always making the offer. And I'm going to teach my salespeople this as well. We always make the offer. And the more uncomfortable it is, there are things that we can do within that offer to bridge the discomfort. But a lot of times we still have to make the offer despite the discomfort. So the first lesson, if you're a human being and you have some sort of conscientiousness, some sort of awareness, then you're going to feel some emotion when a seller shares an asking price with you and you underwrite the deal and there's a big discrepancy. So that's normal. And the fact that you feel that emotion doesn't mean that you should change your behavior away from your process. You always stick to your process. There's a reason that the process is in place. And there are things that you can do within that process that can help move you closer to a certain outcome. And I'll share those with you here in a second. But you always stick to your process. And what's so important, you don't let your emotions dictate your behavior. And that's an important life lesson, by the way. You can use that in whatever it is that you do. But in this specific example, if you feel a certain way about feeling bad because there's such a big price discrepancy, it doesn't mean that you don't continue on with your sales process. And that's the second part of the lesson, right? You don't let your emotion dictate what it is that you say or what it is that you do. You go through your sales process regardless of your emotion. The third lesson here, and this is the part where I'm going to talk a little bit about exactly what it was that I said that helped bridge the discomfort. But you tell the seller that you're uncomfortable. So this particular seller was moving into a different residence and had already signed paperwork to get into that residence by the end of the month, and really had such a horrifying experience when he bought this house and when he sold his previous residence with a realtor that he just did not want to go through that again. And it was very clear that it was going to be appropriate for the route that was going to serve what it was that he was looking to do would be to sell off market to an investor, something easy, something quick. And in my sales process, the very first part of making an offer, I kind of walk through, hey, would you mind, would it be okay if I walk you through what it would look like if you decide that you want to work with us? Is that all right? And then I kind of walk them through, I would send a written offer to your email. We would go through it together. My transaction coordinator would be in touch. That person is going to be in touch with you all the way through to closing. I paint the picture, right? I want them to see a vision of what that is going to look like. And not that that's a little bit of presumptive closing, but it helps set expectations. And I think that's an important part of making the offer because they start to have this vision of working with you. So I go through that. And then I want to summarize their pain and the problems that we're going to solve, right? And so I said, about the property. And I said, Mr. Seller, these parts of this conversation or this part of the process makes me really uncomfortable. And if I had my way, you and me, we had a great conversation the other day. I love doing that. My passion is serving and solving the problems that the sellers bring to me. And I enjoy that. And if I had my way, I could bring someone else to talk about the money stuff because the money stuff makes me a little uncomfortable. And the last thing that I want to do is disappoint you or offend you. But here I am and I need to have the conversation. And I said, what was so important to me about this transaction is that we set this up in a way that we can get it done within your timeline so quickly that we don't have to deal with any of what you dealt with your previous experience with your realtor. I'm going to surpass all of those things, right? So I'm addressing the pain, and we're going to be able to buy this house so that you don't have to worry about fixing anything or whatever the case may be. And it's that part of, I was very uncomfortable because I knew I was about to drop a price on him that was $90,000 different from what it was that he told me that he wanted for the property. And I just told him that I was uncomfortable because I really was. It was honest. And I think by being honest and telling the seller that if you're uncomfortable, hey, I am a little bit uncomfortable, you're not only are you pre-framing and you're kind of mentally preparing them for what is likely going to be a lower offer than what they were expecting. Because as I'm saying those things, think about it. The seller is not going to be surprised if then I give this low offer as opposed to, hey, Mr. Seller, blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, the offer is blank. And the seller's going to be like, oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. I can't believe that. So by telling the seller that you're uncomfortable, that there's a ton of discomfort, but then you summarize the pain that they were in and you talk about how what it is that you're going to do is going to relieve all of the pain that they're currently in, you're kind of anchoring their emotion a little bit and you're just being honest and telling them that you're uncomfortable. And so when I made the offer, I said something like, yeah, Mr. Seller, again, man, I'm just so worried that I'm going to disappoint you here. And all I want to do is just take care of what it is that you're looking to accomplish. But what my team told me the property qualifies for is bam. And then I gave him the price. So, and again, we had a good discussion. I did my best to overcome some objections, but at the end of the day, he told me we wanted to have a follow-up conversation. We had the follow-up conversation. He countered and we did the deal. So short and sweet here, but super, super important when you're talking to sellers, regardless of the distance between what you can pay for a house and what they're expecting, you always give the offer. Don't ever not get an offer because you're uncomfortable. The number that they give you has very little relevance to whether or not you actually have the ability to do the deal. And that's what I've learned after lots and lots and lots of deals. I'm approaching 100 deals in my real estate career, and looking back at all of them, I think I could have done many more deals had I dealt with my discomfort in the proper way, had I disclosed the discomfort to the seller, and had I still offered to the seller. So hope you guys got some value out of that. Always make your offers. The number that they give you doesn't matter, and don't let your emotions dictate how you actually follow through in the sales process. Always go through your sales process. So thanks for listening, and hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.